I'd like to add for. John, are you okay to do a Grape update?
I was afraid you were going to ask that. Yeah, I can do that.
And I wasn't here last week for the antenna discussion.
Neither was I.
Oh.
I haven't been here for 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 2 weeks.
So
I was on vacation for 2 weeks and I don't remember what happened last week.
probably discuss that.
Think about this, 15th, 12th, I don't remember.
There may be another item to add to the agenda that we've been talking about in the New England group, which is power supply sustainability. What happens when the AC goes down, and what can we do to, mitigate that? What can we suggest to people?
Along those lines, I might ask, just how stringent is this phrase 24/7, 365 as a operating rule for Grape stations?
Well, if you have your station set up and you're transmitting a kilowatt, you clearly have to shut down the Grape and disconnect the antenna, otherwise you will roach the input. So it is assumed and understood that it gets interrupted for operating. But all the other times, I mean, we can't ask you to give your station up. That would be ludicrous. I mean, that's why you're in the hobby. I mean, it's just a no-brainer, but the assumption is you put the thing in standby and disconnect the antenna, do your transmitting, then reconnect it, and it'll take off where it left off.
Right. So therefore, a short interruption in power is not a big deal, or is a big deal?
A short interruption in power causes the system to restart.
Yeah.
I suspect that we were going to put this job in probably the cron tabs to start it up. Because that's what I've done. Actually, I put it in rc.local as a startup script. So when the system boots, it would kick off FLDigi. We will probably do the same with the new code for this. I haven't worked that all out yet because we haven't actually written the code yet, but Kung is going to be doing that particular piece of code, and we'll have to have a way of remembering what the settings were for the 3 radios. So, because that's all controlled in software now.
Uh-huh. And not stored, it's not archived or stored anywhere?
Well, as of yet, we haven't done that, but we will be. We'll put it into a file what the 3 radio frequency settings are.
I think we can probably just have a script that the Raspberry runtime reads that sets up the frequencies.
That's startup.
Yeah.
That's startup. Yeah.
The way I'd look at the 24/7 365 thing, that's a goal, but it's not a hard requirement. If we made that a hard requirement for everybody, we wouldn't have a lot of participants probably. So it's.
Thank you.
Although during the eclipse, we probably don't want you to shut it down. But but
Well,
other than that, yeah.
Then that's a. Yeah, I'm a retired product manager, and I keep harping on the phrase, show me a spec, a written spec that describes all this behavior. And I understand in this organization that's probably not going to happen, but it sure would be nice to cut down on wild tangent in design.
Well, I did write a document that's 78 steps long. I want to say it's 5.
Oh yes, and I love that document.
And there's also a document that defines the file spec and the file system for the whole operation.
Right.
As far as operating procedures, I think Christina has something for possibly for that, but will probably be, since this code is not going to be based on FLDigi, it's going to be based on a dedicated C++ program. It'll be a lot easier to write a description of how to run it.
Yeah,
So that will be done. I understand what you're saying. Unfortunately, I'm the one who's writing it. And that takes away from my doing the development. So it's a balance of time, other than the fact that I'm working a full-time job running a lab here. So I'm not retired yet.
you're doing an excellent job.
Ugh,
Yes.
I need another one of me.
So George, I'll put a note for whomever, we need a document that says care and feeding of your grape system. So once you've got it up and running per John's instructions, how do you keep it running for the next 2 to 3 years? And those are the kind of questions. So I hear that clearly.
Well, the operating time is actually, this is the perfect time they ask that question, because I'm in the final phases of laying out or finishing the layout for the logic board, which runs the Raspberry Pi and the Pico. So it'd be pretty easy for me to put a 2-wire header on there with a Schottky diode into the +12 input, and you could just put a battery on it and run it that way. That's also a possibility. I have bought wall warts already that are 12-volt wall warts that run this thing, because it's 12 volts at a couple amps.
Oh,
But if you had one of those little 12 volts, 7 ampere hour gel cells or lithium ion batteries, that would be perfect for this. And you just feed that straight in. In fact, that might be a better way of doing it, because then you could put your battery tender on that battery, and then have the battery just running that. And because I know my Pis at home are running off a 12-volt battery, and I'm keeping it maintained. So I've actually had power failures already, and it just keeps cruising on through.
Yeah, that's
Especially
what we
the
want.
old Grape ones, it's very problematic in terms it takes 73 to 76 seconds for the NTP server to set the time, which then causes, if this FLDigi starts up right away, you've got about a minute of data that's delayed in time. And I've got a script to fix that, but it's a pain in the butt.
Yeah, I think we could delay the data collection until NTP synchronizes, and also the Bodnar, gets a lock.
Yeah, that would take some code.
Or
The NTP lock, couldn't find an operating system call in Python that would tell me that the NTP server had set. I could just wait 2 minutes and do it that way, but
Yeah, you
find an internet
can-
connection.
You can just get to run the NTP status and grep for the PLL locked.
On the Grape 2, yes.
Well, I was thinking the Grape 1, but the Grape 2 probably has.
I don't know if you have access to commands on the Leo Bodnar to do that. I'd have to look at it, because he brings out a set of commands that are specific to his unit, and he does not give you access to some things.
I was thinking NTP, but you're right about on the Bodnar. It's
Because the Bodnar is not setting the system time, it's just creating a frequency reference, which is what's different about the Grape 2. It is setting the time and frequency reference. And that, I think, happens during boot, if I'm not mistaken. If we're running the Stratum 1 time server off of the U blocks, it sets pretty darn quick. So it's usually not a problem. And you can query the U blocks for the number of satellites. And if you've got one satellite locked, it's locked in, because the GPS engine will not run without the 1 PPS. It just is dead. So.
Okay.
Anyway, status on the Grape 1.
Yep.
Making good progress. Actually, some excellent progress. Bill has, close your ears, Bill, been a phenomenal asset that he's gotten more done in the last month than I've gotten done in the last year. So
you're talking about the Grape 1 and the Grape 2?
Grape 2.
Okay.
Now we're, Bob Benedict has left the group, and we'll leave it at that. Kung, which is Nathaniel's grad student, has signed up to do the coding C coding for the running the main Grape Raspberry Pi code, which he's going to start in about a week or two. So I'm looking forward to getting that going. But Bill has already done a lot of the heavy lifting in terms of segmenting processes to different code or slices of the processor. And he's actually had it saving in real time already using the engine, I believe. Correct me if I'm wrong, Bill. Real-time data collection into the Pi. And he actually was storing it on the operating system SD card and not to the SSD drive, which is going to be slower. And he was able to have it run for, I don't know, 4 or 8 hours and not miss a beat. So it's really, it looks like we've accomplished the heavy hurdle of actually being able to handle that data rate coming in. And it will only get better once we have the SSD on the USB 3 port.
Actually, I'm saving it to the SSD now, and it's
Okay.
the same characteristics.
Okay.
It's 100%, but it's running 100% CPU on one core too. So I don't quite understand that, but
That doesn't surprise me.
all the data is there. So
Yeah, and it's storing it, and we're working on. I still haven't completely brought up the data collection engine, but Bill just finished the code last night for the command. I'm going to try that tonight. Last night I was working on something else I had to take care of, but Bill, the code for updating or setting the timing registers does work. I was going to take a picture of it last night. It gave the right number, so
okay, good.
That's in good shape.
After my struggling with byte swaps.
Yeah, big Indian,
Sorry about that.
little Indian
Yeah.
will always bite you.
Yeah, I didn't realize,
No
you
pun
were sending it
intended.
in big Indian, and the Pico understands little Indian. So
Yeah.
we learned that.
Yeah, you'll learn that the hard way every time. So
Yeah.
making good progress. I've done 12 updates to the logic board. I've got those all done. The footprints for some of the parts changed, which means I could not have given them to a board manufacturer because the reflow would not have worked. So I've got those all fixed. I haven't built a new version yet of the complete RF deck, which is going to be on my plate this week. What Bill has now is a older version of the RF deck that just has the A to D, so we can actually read them with 3 fixed input voltages. So once I get the data engine working and verify that the input levels to the 2 5351s are correct and working correctly, I can then put that whole board to bed and start working on debugging and finishing up the RF deck, which I've been through once, but I still have to build the last version before I create all the documentation so I can give it to a manufacturer to build. And then I have to build the test fixtures to test all these boards, because I have 50 logic boards to test and 50 RF boards to test. So, and then creating the test procedures and setting up the test equipment. So yeah, I got my work cut out for me. And oh, by the way, we want this next week.
I was wondering if we want to start thinking about beta sites for testing.
Yes.
Thinking out a few.
I've got a couple people in mind. Actually, I'm working right now, and behind me is setting up the procedure for Gary to build the 50 cases, because the fan has to be the fan is in the case, but you can't plug it onto the header because we're using the header. So you have to cut the leads off, the ends off of the fan, and solder it onto a power Schottky diode that's big enough to solder to on the Grape board. So I'm creating a document on how to do that. And he's going to build all 50 units, because you have to also put the ribbon cable in the case while you're building the case. So you have to put the fan in, feed the fan lead through the little slot and solder it in and route it so it just fits. And then put the cable on and build it all together. So he's in probably 3 or 4 weeks time, we'll have all those done. But there's no crisis on your part, Gary. I'm guessing if you did 3 or 4 a day, that would be fine.
Sounds good.
That way you're not trying to beat yourself up, and you're not the limiting gating factor by any stretch of the imagination. So, but I'm going to give some thought to putting external power in for the 12 volts, or maybe we create a 12 volt plug-in board that replaces the wall wart if people want to do that. So they could buy the 7 Ah gel cell and then use the lead set to plug it in. And that might be the better way to go.
Or what's the market like for uninterruptible power supplies? I mean, years ago, they had to be pretty big and heavy when you were, powering an 8086 Dell, tower, but
Yeah, I'm trying to remember. I mean, it'd be the smallest one you could probably get, and they're under $100. That might be an easier way to do it too. I don't know. I've not trucked down that path yet to figure out what's the best solution, but
I mean, other than the eclipse days, if somebody loses their grape for an hour or two a month, it's really not, I
No,
don't believe
you're
it's
not
gonna
gonna see
affect the
it.
value. So
yeah, you're exactly right.
it may not be worth throwing a lot of development effort into it, is all I'm saying.
Now that I'm thinking about it, may make more sense to have a separate power harness that plugs into the battery and make a little board for that. And you can bring your charger into it and have it maintain it and keep it going. That way, when it drops out, it runs off battery and it doesn't know the difference. So that's probably the easiest solution. Because the batteries are only 20 or $30. In fact, if you get the lithium ion ones, they're very impressive. You can buy a keeper for it that'll run it all the time too. And we can, like I say, the little board, I could knock that out in a day to do all that. So
Remember too, there's kind of two classes of Grape 2 stations. The ones we're going to provide to people, we're telling them pretty much that it's hands off. You just buy it, plug it in, connect up your antenna or put up your antenna, and you can leave it alone. And other people are going to want to fiddle, but there's going to be a lot that just going to be
Right.
more hands off. That's all.
yeah, because right now I'm trying to figure out what Kung is going to do for the operating system interface when the thing's running. And I'm thinking of having probably the 3 voltages of the magnetometer data showing up in real time for every second. So I don't want to overload them, but I do want some real-time indication that the thing is actually working. You got the antenna connected, because the waterfall provided a huge diagnostic tool.
Absolutely.
And you need that kind of thing. In fact, I'm thinking about having, since the gain on the front end of the Grape is now settable from 1, 2.5, 4, and 10 to optimize your signal, we're going to have a program that probably runs for 24 hours to evaluate if you got the gain set right, to set these things up.
I would suggest a speaker output. It's so nice to hear.
Well, you've got 3 radios on this one, so they're all going to be
Well-
putting out 500 hertz. So it's not going to
Well-
be very interesting.
Well,
You're not going to be able to tell which one's which, unless you switch between the 3, but
Yeah,
well, you need to be able to do that but that's the easiest way to tell if it's working, in my opinion, anyway.
well, the waterfall also gives you some indication, since you can look at the analog waveform whether you're clipping or not. And that's a huge thing as well. So the diagnostic program I'm envisioning is going to be making the 1 kilohertz measure or 500 hertz measurement in real time, and it's going to keep track of the peak over 24 hours. And if none of them hit 4 volts peak to peak, then the gain is set right, or you have to increase the gain up depending on where the maximum signal is. Of course, you have to run a daytime and nighttime test because it changes pretty drastically. So
That's the thing. Yeah.
So
So
that's
sometimes you don't even hear WWB, and
Right.
Grape 1 is receiving it just fine.
because 10 and 15 you hear during the day and it disappears at night, and 5 is gone during the day and it shows up at night. So you have to run the 24-hour test, much to everybody's chagrin. And I'm sure there's going to be a lot of grousing about that one. But the nice thing is that this Grape 2 will automatically set your latitude, longitude, and grid square.
yay.
So you don't have to fart around with that. But again, that's another little detail that's going to be in the setup program that I haven't worked out yet. So we're getting there. But things are looking good. Like I say, Bill made the big breakthrough I was worried about. He actually accomplished it. So I am hats off to Bill.
Yay.
I could not have done this without him. So thank you, Bill. Oh, by the mention it. Thank you.
3 cheers.
Yes. Just splitting up the core processing is that's way beyond my capability. So I sit back in amazement. I always watch. I like to watch and learn. And I'm learning a lot. Back to net.
All right. So then there's two other kind of hardware side issues that we need to discuss. First being the antenna discussion, which came up last week for the Grape too. What does this mean?
That's my antennas.
Is Dave on here? Dave, are you here?
Yeah, it looks like
I
it.
just got here. I was late, but my ears must have been burning or something.
They're just starting to smoke now.
We should
Dave,
probably,
did you get my email?
Yeah, I did, got partway through it.
Okay. Well, okay, but I was concerned that it had gone down the rat hole in the internet someplace or something.
Yeah, well, Dartmouth's Outlook does like to do that. Goes into the great big bucket in the sky.
Case does the same thing.
I was hoping we'd have a chance to talk about what I put in the email before I'd like you to take a look at it before I make any, but I think I've made some progress.
Yeah. Well, I think maybe, the thing to do is kind of have people compare notes as to what they've tried.
Yeah.
Everything from just a long wire to a small loop or, dipoles and things, and active antennas versus passive.
I'm of the opinion, and we can debate about this, but I'm of the opinion that it doesn't take a lot of antenna to work.
Well, it depends on location. We have to be
Well,
aware of that.
that's probably true, but there's some locations that it's not going to work.
Yeah, if you're in Colorado, a wet noodle will do it.
That's even too much signal.
But
out here in New England, you need a little bit more.
Yeah. My initial thoughts is there's a little balun board that has a balun on it that has an SMA connector that you could wire directly to the antenna SMA input of the Grape 2. And we could either do a symmetrical horizontal, just wire antenna, or ground one end and do a long wire off the one end. I think either of those will work just fine.
Right.
I don't think we need to get anything more expensive than that.
Yeah.
well,
And like an end-fed, if you wanted to do like 5, 10, and 15, if you did a half wave at 5 and then, set it up as an end-fed, you'd have all three.
well, you've got all three in any case. I
Right.
believe,
Well,
because
that's depending on signal strength. Pretty much any dipole or any monopole worked against ground is
just
probably going to go fine. One of the, what I've used for a long time was just a wire from the peak of the roof down to ground stake, and goes into a receiver.
Yeah. Well, that's exactly what I described in that, the first part of that email is the antenna I put up at VE7DXX up in British Columbia was 5, 10, 15, 20, 50 feet of wire
Right.
pulled up in a tree.
Well, half wavelength of 5 megahertz is 30
Well,
meters.
Yeah,
Well,
it's a pretty
but
long
it's
piece
not
of
a
wire.
half wave. It's a
Yeah,
half
it's
wave.
about
100 feet.
100 feet.
Well,
But
I
it
only
might-
put up 50.
But that's where, we ought to have some of us do some
Try it.
experimenting,
Yep.
see what is sufficient. I know, well, of course, I'm using a horizontal loop antenna as my primary. It's a 40-meter horizontal loop that does very nicely broadband as a receive antenna.
So I think the
But-
takeaway from
but
this whole thing is we need to test a couple of different simple
Yeah.
antennas in the
I
remote
haven't-
areas like in New England and see what works.
Yeah, one of the problems, well, it's not exactly a problem, but my situation is I've got a lot of experience with larger loops that we've used up through 10 megahertz, but it doesn't quite make it up to 15. So I need to do a little bit more work with the 1 meter loop, which is common. You know, whether you get it from DX Engineering or there's some online cheap stuff. The cheap stuff, I have one of those. The amplifier is pretty noisy.
If you're
So-
interested in this, I sponsored a senior project 2 semesters ago that we replicated the DX Engineering's mag loop,
Oh, okay.
and we got better performance than what DX Engineering
The
was doing.
broadband version,
Yes.
non-tuned. Oh, yes, that would be very, if you
So
could,
if you have a hula hoop and you put 2 turns of wire in it and tie it in
Right.
the preamp, it works great. And I'll be happy to make the board
up through
public.
15 megahertz with 2 loops, 2 turns.
It's supposed to go up to 30.
Oh,
according to
okay.
its spec. I have noticed that it doesn't like nearby AM broadcast stations, because at 2.5 megahertz, it's sort of the one, we have a radio station here, 1100 AM, that
Right.
is coming in gangbusters. And at the 2.5 megahertz was getting clobbered with on that antenna. So I had to go to a different antenna for that. But
Well,
right now,
there
I'm
are
running-
ways to handle that. I actually, for ours, we, of course, we're doing AM Doppler.
Mhm.
So we want to be picking up the AM band, but we're also close to existing stations. So I actually have developed notch filter that's
Okay.
right at the antenna that will knock it out by around 20 dB.
Okay.
And
Yeah.
between that and nulling it,
Because I've got my mag
get 'em
loop,
out.
the horizontal plane of it pointing towards the WWD. And
Right.
I'm using it for 5, 10, and 15, and it works better than I have an 80 meter off center fed dipole that's up 35 feet.
Right.
And the mag loop one works better than that antenna.
Yeah. Do you have documentation on that?
Yes, I do.
Could you
From the
send
mag
that
loop
around?
or
For the mag loop.
I have the manual here somewhere. So,
Okay.
yeah, I'll have to
No,
find
that
it.
would be great if you could send that around and we could try it out.
But I can actually put the PC board up on, make it public and put it, send the email out for the.
Oh, yeah.
connection, and then the.
Yeah,
prep
because the
part was-
preamp is
Is
as much
it-
as,
The preamp's the tricky part. Now,
that is the
it's the
the
same
thing. We've
preamp
got
I'm
our
using on Grape.
designs, but they don't, at least the way we have them right now, they don't make it quite that far up.
Yeah, I tweaked that was the Grape 2 front end preamp is what this mag loop was.
Yeah.
Like I say,
That-
we got better signal reception off of mine, but it's wide open. There's no filters on it.
Right. But yeah, as I say, I've got experience doing both. You can do a.
Sounds like I need to get one of these in your hands.
Right. That would help.
We can do that in my
Okay.
free time.
Let me,
Right.
I've got
Well-
some boards and stuff, so I'll take a look at
There's-
it.
let me add a comment here if I may.
Yeah.
Yes.
The question is, how good is good enough and how does one measure that? I have a very suboptimal system here. I had been running on a broken inverted V that I recently realized is broken. For some reason, there might be a break in one of the wires or something. But my signal among the Grape group is down, or used to be down maybe 20 dB from everybody else in signal strength. But if you look at the Doppler shift, which is what we're looking for here, right? My signal is right up there duplicating what everybody else is seeing in terms of Doppler shift.
Yeah. So it's high enough above the noise floor that it's
That it's locking
locking
into it.
in.
Yeah. And with the new Grape 2, like I say, there's a 10-to-1 range, which you can set the front end gain on now. And we're going to have a diagnostic program that'll help you set that.
Yeah, John, do you have any experience on how much of signal to noise you need for the program to lock?
We've played around with that. It's actually kind of amazing because I think it's the DFT bins. It doesn't take much. And what we're doing is you're averaging, because we only got a 1 second epoch, and you only get a 1 hertz rate, but you average between them to get the
Right.
1 millihertz resolution. But it,
With the millihertz resolution, the bandwidth's got to be pretty narrow.
Well, you were playing some math games to do
Yeah,
that,
well, that's.
which is what
the
FL did
FFD
used
Right.
to.
doing for you.
Yeah,
Right, right. But
It's
that's the
doable,
thing
but-
is people don't understand that you get a noise figure, you get, you think about the full band noise, and that's not what your limiting factor is, because you're looking at just this tiny little bandwidth. That's of course how FT8 and Whisper all work, is you're really not, they give you these minus 20 dB noise figures, SNRs, but that's for the full band.
Yeah,
The actual noise level at where you're looking is much, much lower than that.
yeah, you're
There's
not.
another
That's what you have to get
Detection
above.
bandwidth is a millihertz or less, yeah.
Right,
well, the trick you can play is on a receive antenna, you do not want to match it to 50 ohms. If you actually take that up, the noise figure drops just by the math. And
Well,
it makes a big
yeah.
difference.
It depends, we actually match our antennas somewhat more in that range. They're like more in the 30 ohm range, but it is in that. And that's just for the broadband nature
Mhm.
of having an inductor and a load resistor. That's what's limiting your,
Yeah, that flattens the Q out.
But,
right,
well, as long as you connect the antenna and hear a 10 dB increase in the noise,
right.
the antenna noise is dominating the system, and that's all you need to do.
Well, that's the other point, is that
Yeah.
at these frequencies, it's the outside noise that's usually the
Well,
limiting factor. That's why we can get
that's-
away with small antennas with preamps.
And that's why I want to make
Exactly right.
the setup program have a graphical display of the 3 radios so you can actually see the signal.
Oh,
Right.
right.
That's really
So-
going to be important because that visual tells you right away, oh yeah, it's this big or
Excellent.
it's clipping and
Excellent.
hitting the tops, you got too much gain.
Right,
That's kind of
instant
intuitive.
feedback.
With like with the Grape One, where it's a totally fixed gain system, you want to tune the antenna size so it doesn't overload and it provides enough signal.
Again, if it depends on location,
but
because
to
we're
get-
way all over the map depending where we are. That's
Right.
a hard one to predict.
so those of us
Right,
here in New
right.
England are a good test for
Sensitivity.
sensitivity.
Okay,
We're
Can
out in the fringe,
Yeah.
I get back to this antenna thing?
many more
a
ways
little
than
bit?
one.
Kind of a philosophical thing. What are we looking to do here as far as providing an antenna for this guy?
right,
That's
that's
one of
a
these
good
That's
grapes.
what the discussion's about. We're
Right.
talking about a wire antenna and we're going to try different types, either a
Well,
symmetrical,
I'm thinking
horizontal.
give them lots of choices.
well,
Let them make a choice, just from a single wire or dipole to a whip with
my,
a preamp or a loop with preamp.
Yep.
well, time out.
Well,
There's
well,
two
are we-
things here. It's
Yeah,
it's
first-
the antennas that people want to use that they may have or may want to yet obtain.
Mhm.
And there's what Hamsci will supply for those people who ask for an antenna, which is about 25 or 30% of the respondents so far.
Oh, okay.
We
That's
need
the
to
point.
focus our discussion down to what can we put in a cardboard box with 100 feet of wire, a 9-to-1 balun, whatever kind of, 10 feet of
Yeah.
coax or something from the balun to the radio, and make a few of those and put them in a few of the existing Grape
I-
installations and see if they work.
Gary, you 100% nailed it.
let me, pardon me, please. Do I have any say in this?
Yeah, I'm listening.
Okay, I volunteered to head this up. Now, if I'm not going to head it up, that's okay. I'll back off.
It's not my choice.
Well,
Right now, it's in Gary's hand because he's doing the distribution.
Uh,
But
I know
we
if I'm doing
haven't
the
done the
distribution.
technical work yet. We
I
haven't done the technical.
volunteered to Nathaniel to look to.
Where are you
do
located,
this.
Bob?
Where am I located?
Yeah.
I'm in Groton, Massachusetts.
Oh, okay. So you're one of the,
I'm
Yeah,
one of
he's
the-
one
I'm
of the fringe.
Northeast guys who's,
you're on the fringe with me. Cool. But not quite as far as you and David.
Yeah, but Bob has a lifetime experience in designing antennas,
well,
Yeah,
and he'll tell
I
you all
have designed a few, yes.
Okay, well, you sound like the right person to be doing the job, if you
Well,
ask me.
I wish Dave had finished reading my email because,
I read
I-
90% of it.
okay, did you get to my eureka moment?
Guess not.
My
Time for
eureka
eureka.
moment was, see, I'm trying to think of, first of all, I'm trying to understand what the philosophical point of we're trying to do here. Are we trying to give a guy an antenna that will work over 5 to 15, which is the specified range, in any location? Well, that's a pretty tough thing to do, because I can imagine the guy on the 40th story of some building, which has got a little window that looks out onto a city with all kinds of noise. And I can imagine a guy in Texas with 40 acres of pasture outside his window. You know, it's
Well,
a good story.
Well,
There's
Bob,
no
can
one
you,
size antenna that fits all.
well, Bob,
What I
you
can't
ask about the eureka moment. I don't see a eureka moment in it. I did finish it to the end.
Well,
I don't know what you're
Well,
asking.
I said my
saying.
eureka moment was, I think, I thought I was looking at
Oh, there it is.
half-wave dipoles, off-center fed dipoles, so-called end-fed antennas. I've looked at the so-called magnetic loop, which is a expression I hate.
What's a one-turn transformer?
Yeah.
That's what it is.
Right.
I don't, and I
Well,
thought
it's
the
not an
idea was
E-field
keep it
antenna.
simple.
No,
Keep
it's
it
definitely
simple.
magnetic.
And my eureka moment was, I think the best thing to do is to give the guy 100 feet of wire, 3 insulators, a roll of coax, and a pamphlet that describes different antennas he can try that
Well-
would fit his location.
But the problem is not everybody has the space to run out 100 feet of wire.
That's why
So that's not going to be a
Well, you
single
don't use the
solution.
whole 100 feet.
Well, but
Well, the issue is what's good enough. And that
That's
has
my-
to
yes,
be
my point.
defined. And
That's what we
what's
still have
dancing
to figure
around
out.
here. I can make an argument for the
Show me the
science
spec.
purposes that we want all the Grape 2 antennas to be identical.
Oh,
Because we want equal, I could make that argument. It's
Yeah,
not
yeah.
gonna happen. It's not
No.
practical.
yeah.
But
And the
you know-
thing is, if you give people the chance to just use their existing antenna, you're never going to know, you're not going to be able to calibrate amplitudes.
Well, you can't anyway, so.
but you're
Well,
looking
if
at the
you had
Doppler
a
shift,
known
not,
antenna, you could.
but we're looking at the Doppler shift, not at
Right.
the power received.
Right,
Right.
but the signal level is related to how you measure that Doppler shift. And I'm
And-
thinking a graphical setup program, since we have adjustable gain now, will allow us to make some adjustments for the location. Like
Yeah.
10-to-1 adjustment.
Even though my received signal strength is down, sometimes down 20 or 30 dBs, the Doppler shift recorded is right in line with everybody else here in New England.
Right, which means that you have a minimum signal level that's acceptable.
I know, but what I'm saying is,
But even if I define that as a volts per meter at the antenna jack, 99% of these people aren't going to have the equipment to measure it.
Sure.
You really have to go back to a visualization, which is what I'm getting at with what Bob is pushing on is, we really need to
Well-
have a way of testing this, whether it's a
well, we have
speaker
to have-
or a graph of the signal level or whatever. You got to make it intuitive.
Right. Well, FL Digi, doesn't it measure amplitude?
Yes.
Yeah.
Right. So use that as our
Oh,
standard
the-
way of determining whether it's sufficient.
the
We just need to
FL
know, what's the minimum SNR. But of course, propagation conditions can widely vary. I know right now,
That's
you
why
know,
my
there's some
program has
days
to
I
run for
barely
24
hear
hours.
megahertz.
Yeah, I get that. It's a problem. Anyway, Rachel, you're trying to break in here.
Yes, there is a lot of I mean, just because we're diverging from the problem a little, before we solve a bunch of problems that don't need to be solved necessarily, we should, did anyone on the survey complain that they didn't have enough space to throw out an antenna? Do we have a lot of people who are city bound
Well,
volunteering?
we didn't get that much detail back. And the plan is to look at the respondents and see geographically who fits in the places that we need to sample data. If there was somebody in New York City on the 40th floor that was in an apartment, my guess is we probably wouldn't send them a grant-funded Grape 2. If they're the only person in that grid square in the United States, that offers, maybe we would. I don't know. But we've got the ability to pick and choose where these are going, and we've got the ability to talk to people and interview them as to what their situation is before we send them stuff.
So the 100 foot of wire and 100 feet of coax and 3 insulators might be just all he needs to build an antenna that works in his situation.
We also have the HOA restrictions you have to deal with as well, but a wire antenna is much easier to hide than a big honking piece of metal.
There is that, but then on the other hand, either a active whip or small loop, you can stick out in the garden quite
Yeah, I was
easily.
impressed with the mag loop because it's actually a 2-turn transformer that uses the air as a dielectric to
Right,
the current in the field or the current in the antennas in Fort Collins. And
right.
I was impressed that it picked it up, and it does a really good job. It's really
Right.
impressive.
I'm
So
going
the other question Nathaniel asked me, and maybe you know this, John, is what's our budget for antennas? I mean, we don't have unlimited funds either. That's the nice thing about Bob's idea. It's pretty inexpensive.
Yeah, I'm working on that because
Also, it
Okay.
might be said, I think Bob has brought up before in some of our meetings that the coax can be just regular old TV coax with F connectors.
Mhm.
Doesn't have to be ham radio stuff.
That's actually better than RG58.
75 ohm has
And
a
it's got a
better signal
connector
noise
on
ratio.
it, and it's available in any big box store.
Yeah,
And that would save money on our side.
Right.
you
Okay.
buy a 100-foot spool of
I
video cable and
just got back from Aruba for 3 weeks. We went down there without any antenna at all. We went to the local hardware store, which also sells groceries. And we picked up a spool of speaker wire and a couple of F adapters and things, and a roll of what they call RG6,
Mhm.
and put up an antenna and worked the world. I worked all on QRP power.
Okay.
So
I suggest that we table this discussion for now, because it does seem like it's something that we still need a budget discussion on and qualifications, and we also
Yeah.
need to review our geographic selections before I think it'll even become a problem.
And John, I am interested in trying out your design, however we do that.
Okay.
At least
Make
get,
a note
if you
of
could
it.
send documentation, but you know, if you got a circuit board,
there's
Oh, yeah.
love to try it.
But I
there's
do-
there's a $50 mag loop, they call it. I'm gonna buy the kit and try it.
Well, I've got one of
Just-
those. It's pretty noisy preamp.
Well, but does it work?
No,
No?
that's the short
Okay.
answer. Compared to what we're doing, no.
This for now, just because I want to get you all out of here, not to cut anyone off. And I know the New England group wanted to talk something about power supplies, unless that was answered earlier by the.
Hey, it's been a good spirited discussion, I think.
It has, but I just want to make sure that everybody gets what they wanted out of the meeting and leaves in an hour.
Yeah.
Right. Okay,
12 minutes
thanks.
ago.
Why I'm
More
here.
should be revealed.
Okay. Was there still discussion? I know we had a bit of discussion on the operating power early, but was there still something people want to discuss with the power supply in the New England group?
Yeah, thinking having a battery option cable to power this rather than a wall wart. Or we could also look at what a UPS would be, because I've already bought the 50 wall warts. So I have those ready to go. But having it uninterruptible is a significant benefit if you're in an area where you lose power often.
That's
I-
me.
I think-
I have a UPS running the whole shack and it saves me like twice a week.
Yeah,
And
wow.
it's a one. It's a APC 1000, I think. And
Wow.
you can
That's
get those
amazing.
at Office Depot.
John, what's the basic power of this?
12 volts, it's less than an amp.
Okay.
I want to say at peak, it probably kicks up something under a half an amp. I haven't actually measured it yet because I haven't. put
Because
the-
I'm a big proponent of charger into 12-volt battery, load off of the battery.
That could be
very
easily done,
simple.
actually.
What's that?
That could be easily done.
Right. So even if you just do a float charger, 13.6 volts,
Mm-hmm.
12-volt lead acid, or now they have
The lithium ion, right?
the lithium, the iron phosphates actually work running off of that.
It's a sort of a homebrew UPS, you could say.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Right.
The charger
Very
has to be
simple,
more than a
very
trickle
effective.
charger.
Right.
Charger
Well,
has to be significantly above the steady load.
Well, it's not a trickle charger, it's a float charger.
Right.
And that's
Well,
why
a
I
flow
like
charger
lead
probably
acids,
is only
because
equivalent to what you're drawing continuously.
no, it
depends on the
can
flow
be,
chart.
You have to exceed that by some significant amount to charge the battery.
Well, the definition
how-
of a flow charger is the volts per cell. 2.25 volts per cell on a lead acid is float charge.
yeah.
2.5 volts per cell is cycle charge.
But a flow
So-
charge is often an amp and you're drawing,
Well, you can make it 2 amp.
No,
this
you
way,
can
yeah.
you can float charge at any amp, and
Right.
most of lead acids are self-limiting at that voltage.
Yep.
That's what's the beauty of it. You
what I'm
can
saying is a 1
you can
amp
run a-
charger is probably not enough.
Actually, it
depends
might
on
be.
no. Well, I mean, what I do is I use just a regular 12-volt power supply turned up to 13.6.
That's more than a flow charger, but yeah, okay.
No, that is a float charger.
Yeah, the
That's what a
float,
float charger is.
Well,
flow
typical
charger
flow
is not
charge is
defined
about
by
an
the-
amp.
the flow
No.
charger is not
If you
divided.
go buy
defined by
a
the current.
commercial flow charger, it's probably about an
I'm
amp.
not. It
No.
Oh, if
depends
you're talking
how-
off the shelf stuff
no,
that you put,
that-
someone,
That is not a valid statement. You can get 5 amp, you can get 20 amp float chargers,
Yeah, the float means the voltage, not the current.
right? And that you can, but that's what I'm saying is it's very easy just to take a regular power supply, set it to 13.6 volts, put it across your battery, and there's your float charger. And you can size it whatever you want. And I would do, basically, if your load is an amp, how long do you want it to stay on for if the power goes out? If you want it to stay on for a day, you're going to need like a 25, 30 amp hour battery. You're going to want to charge it, have it so it charges up in a day, say, but that's just double the, that's C over 10.
Mhm.
So for 30 amp hour, that's 3 amps. A 5 amp power supply floating a 30 amp hour battery running a 1 amp load,
It's fine.
done.
but that's not an off-the-shelf solution for somebody who doesn't know what they're doing.
We tell them
if
what
you-
power supply to buy.
Yeah,
But I mean, any 12-volt switching power supply that can adjust its voltage, you do that all the time.
mhm.
Okay.
The only restriction there is you have to be careful about the no load bleeder on the output. But you can handle that by putting a Schottky diode
Yeah,
the way. too.
and that's what I was gonna recommend you do. Put a Shockey diode in there and you're good to go.
Right. Yep.
And I
Very
could put that
simple.
on the board. So this is a good time to discuss.
Oh, that's
it.
true. That's
I
true.
could still put that on the board, and I've got a 3 amp Shockey diode on there now for protection. I can add
Yeah.
a second one real easy to be the input.
Yeah, and if you trust them, I've had mixed results with the no drop diodes, the 0 ohm diodes, active diodes. They do
Uh-huh.
work, but
Yeah.
you have to know how to design it. But those
Yeah.
are, you can actually get it so that you have a FET switching it in and out.
Yep.
And it's actually 0 drop. But Shockey is fine. You just set the power supply up a couple of tenths of a volt.
It's usually a 0.3 or 0.4 volt burden. It's
Right.
not 0.8 or
But
0.9.
the
Yeah, it's
current,
fine.
when it actually is, well, of course, you'd always have the 1 amp load of the receiver. So, if you just set it to whatever the, 2 tenths, 3 tenths above what you want it to float at, you're good.
Yeah, it's doable.
Yep.
Anyway, back to Rachel.
No, if that's the end of the power discussion, that leaves us 6 minutes to go. Does anyone else have any questions, comments, concerns?
Well, it's also that we have some takeaway items from this meeting. One, we probably need to start working on the antenna testing. Probably all by Bob and by David there for looking at alternatives for a cheap wire antenna. And whether it's vertical or horizontal is another thing we can play with, because the original signal coming in is vertically polarized, but
But it gets twisted.
it gets
one-
twisted.
Yeah, the one reason I
It's not-
favor,
yeah,
one- reason I do favor a loop is you can null any, if there's a nearby station that's going to swamp it.
Mhm.
So
But that-
I think
uh,
it's not one size fits all, but we need to be able to give people
You're
a few
absolutely right.
choices.
Yeah.
And
Especially
just
if
to prove them out, to know, this is going to work for you if this is where you are.
Okay.
Let me
I've-
just add,
I've got 2 sites on the air, so
Mm-hmm.
that's something else I can do. Is put up multiple antennas at either site. So I say on the air that I think the lightning took it out, or I actually think the UPS stirred up the memory in the
made soup out
Raspberry
of it, huh?
Pi or something.
The randomized access memory.
Yeah, right only memory.
right only, yes. Let me just add a little side note for anybody trying to build a Grape 1.12. Some parts have been out of stock. I had gotten all the parts except the 49.9 ohm resistor, and I just got a note from Mouser saying that it's being shipped. If anyone else is in the same boat.
I also had somebody on the Grape, not chat, but whatever the email chain is, have come up with an alternate 5 volt, very good low dropout regulator, which I looked up and it's perfect for it. So I actually was gonna
I
add
saw
that. I'm going to add that to the list.
Good suggestion as an alternate part number.
Yeah, because it's actually good for 150 mils, not the 100 mils that I had, that the other one is, and it should work, same pin out, same everything. So that's perfect.
Also
Yeah.
low noise output.
I think as an alternative, it's supposed to be low noise, but I'm not sure what the
I don't remember which one was
rejection
which.
bandwidth is. That's what was nice about the one I was using. It had a pretty high rejection bandwidth,
Right.
which the 7805 series does not have.
Mm-hmm.
But those were made in the 70s, so what do you want? Hey, Rachel, 2 minutes.
Yeah. I have 3 on my watch, but I don't think we need to use them necessarily. I will put a quick note for those of you who are around for the Grape like PR branding kind of discussion that's still going on, and we're probably going to look at some other options other than Scranton. But other than that, I think we are good to go. All of you are free. We'll keep maybe looking at the Grape 2 potential locations and kind of following up on, our antenna and power supply type stuff.
Yeah, I've got to talk to Gary about some of that as well. So it looks
Yes.
like he disappeared.
Oh yeah, he had to run.
Okay.
One thing I wanted to put into the remember to put into the antenna discussion is
Mhm.
things that will survive having a transmitter right next to it. For those of us who are active hams, that is
Yep.
a part of this matrix.
Yeah, there is. I have back-to-back diode inputs on the antenna input lead now instead of the MOV.
Some of the solutions will
Actually, I've got some resistance.
not
there.
only
It should
survive,
handle
but
that.
you still get a signal through it, even if
Oh,
it'll have the dynamic range
I-
to handle it.
oof.
I haven't blown out my Grape yet, and 1,500 watts is
Right.
sometimes not very far away.
What's
That's
your
something we do
separation?
want experience with.
How far is your separation between the two antennas?
Well, in some
100 feet?
cases, it's only about what?
100 feet, 50 feet?
Well, it's 50 feet vertical in the case of the active antenna. In case of the 40 meter dipole that 30 meter dipole that I use on the 40 meter rig, which is sometimes 1,500 watts when 40 meters is noisy. And I haven't blown out my my Grape yet, and it's on the 80 meter dipole, which is 50 feet away.
Okay.
John. You know,
Good.
they're not parallel, but they're not end on either.
Okay. That's probably what's saving you, but yeah, that sounds doable.
Same
And,
here.
and there's no diodes in it.
I've got that prototype preamp that you sent me, John.
Mhm.
I've got it connected to the MFJ active loop antenna, and it's about 60 feet away from an antenna that sometimes runs a kilowatt, and it's been okay.
That's good to know. Wow.
Hasn't hurt the MFJ active loop antenna. I won't call it a mag loop because Bob doesn't like it. I kind of agree. So
Yeah.
anyway, whatever we want to call
Small
it, the
loop.
active loop, it's a loop with a preamp in it, and it has survived being within 60 feet of a kilowatt on multiple bands. So
60 feet. Okay. That sounds like 50, 60 feet's the magic number then. At least that.
Oh, as I said, I think I need a bigger amplifier.
1,500 isn't good enough for you, huh?
Doesn't blow out the,
If you
Yes.
can't blow it up, it's not big enough.
Yeah. The
Oh, you're
paraphrase,
not-
we're
you're
gonna
not
need a bigger amp.
Oh, no.
You're not transmitting on 10 megahertz either.
Well, but
Well, it's a broadband preamp. It's not that selective.
I've yet to measure the Grape selectivity, but it's pretty wide, isn't it, John? It must be in several megacycles, I suspect.
Well, the input filter is resonant, and the Q of that is really what you're looking at.
And it can't be very high with those little toroids.
No, it's not a real high Q.
Yeah, I've been gonna measure that, but I just haven't.
I've actually got plots of that on my network analyzer. I'll have to dig them up. It's pretty wide, but it's not horrible. It's what you would expect. Plus, I got a 1K ohm resistor across it, and that detunes it.
Right.
There's all kinds of stuff going on.
It loads it. Well, that's of course the input of the mixer is about 1,500 ohms, I recall.
Yeah, that's better.
I just never understood though why you didn't use that as a balanced mixer on the input.
Because of the grounding issue.
Well, I just,
Like I say,
nobody uses it. You weren't the first one, but
Yeah, well, again, the ground of the protection ground for the antenna is sort of why I mean,
Well,
I am
I,
looking at
I-
it differentially because they're both tied to that mixer's both tied to ground, you know, but yeah,
I've modified a few and and I put in a parallel tuned circuit with a real capacitor and a real coil wound on a toroid, and then I
Mhm.
wind a few turns of wire on the toroid. And so there's no, and then run the mixer balanced that way.
that makes sense.
It reduces, although I don't think it's a big issue with HF, but it certainly reduces the radiation of the local oscillator.
Yeah, one of the reasons I stayed away from a Ballon is it's a hand assembled part and it is also hand soldered, and that increases production costs significantly. So I mean, I
Yeah.
could put that, I could easily put it in there 1-to-1 and just sniff it off there, bring it in, but
Yeah, well,
something's better.
what,
Whatever is just good enough is what we're going with.
well, you with those little coils, you can put her in a pick and place machine and she just rolls out the other end.
All you gain is carrier rejection, which isn't a big deal in this case.
Yeah, not so much at HF because the noise level is so high. But
Okay. Well, we're 5 minutes over and Rachel's giving us the finger wag.
73 all.
73.
73.
Good
hey,
chat.
see you all next week.
Yep.
Yep, 73.
Hey, Dave,
Yes,
you stay on for a few minutes?
okay.